Hello and welcome to REGO-FIX TechChat. My name is David McHenry. I am the Engineering and Technical Manager here for REGO-FIX USA. A very common question we get when it comes to ER assembly into the nut is, why does our nut retain it when a lot of others don't? So let's talk about that for a moment. When the ER collet was designed, we designed or developed what we call the nut, which is an original style ER nut. If you look inside at the eccentric groove, you can see it's very pronounced and off to one side. And when you take your collet and you lay it over so the groove goes over top of the lip on the inside, it assembles easily. The only problem is it doesn't hold on to the collet, which makes assembly just a little bit more complicated, and we'll demonstrate that for you here in just a moment. The high Q nut, on the other hand, is more of a current style nut design. If you look at the inside of it and its eccentric ring, you can see it's parabolic in shape. Now, we've gone over this before, but I'll go over it again. Each high Q nut has a little dimple. You take the collet, you lay it over the dimple, and a simple snap puts it together. And now my collet is retained into the nut itself, making assembly much, much easier. And again, we'll demonstrate that here in just a moment. Removal, just find your little dimple and push the collet back towards the dimple, and it comes out nice and easy, making your tool changes fairly easy and quick to do. So why do we actually want to hold on to that collet during our assembly? Well, the best way to give you an answer for that is to demonstrate it and show you what happens when you don't. Okay, so I've moved over to the workbench and we have our Torco block, we have a torque wrench head with an extension handle, a Cat 40 holder, it could be anything, ER32, a high Q nut, a generic style nut. And the reason I'm using a generic one, well, this is what we find from a lot of our competitive manufacturers that are out there. It still works fine, it just doesn't have the advantages of the high Q, and it can cause you some assembly issues. So that's why we're going to use this one. I have an ER32 collet and the appropriate sized carbide blank to use as a cutting tool. The idea here is we're going to go through and show you what happens when you don't assemble things correctly, and then what kind of damage you can actually see from that misassembly and what you may have to replace or look for in your shop as you're going through looking to replace tools. So let's start off by going ahead and putting our Cat 40 tool holder into our Torco block, and let's do the easy assembly first. We're going to do the high Q nut assembly first. So again, we find our little dimple, and in this case it's right here on the bottom. We're going to take our collet, we're going to lay it over top, and then I can simply take this over to my tool holder, slide it in, take my carbide blank. My assembly is very, very simple and easy to do. Now, you've seen us use the Torco block in the past. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing we've done before. I've already put my ER32 ring onto my Torco block. I've set my indicator to the appropriate size, and that's all there is to it. No damage, no difficulty in putting this together. Looking at the face of the tool holder assembly, you can see that it's virtually flush with the top of the nut, so everything is assembled correctly. And sometimes when you do it wrong, like we'll see with the style nut, you might see some differences or some gaps. We'll look for those during our assembly. Take it back apart, and we'll start over with the generic So take my pieces back apart. Go to my generic and on this one, you can see it doesn't want to hold it together correctly. Now, I had to shake that, but it still fell out. What can happen, I'm an assembly guy, I'm trying to hurry through my assembly, I lay this through, when I go to my tool holder and I go to put it in, it falls out just like that. I don't catch it, and I go ahead and put my nut down on top. Now, if I'm in a hurry, I'm probably going to do exactly what I'm going to show you right here. I just drop my cutting tool in, hand tighten the nut, then I go for my wrench and I start operating on tightening that torque. Now, one thing I'm noticing as I'm doing this is I can actually hear a little bit of a grind, but I'm not getting a whole lot of torque onto my readings. I just keep pulling and pulling, and I might end up with this, where I actually have a value that reached maximum torque. My tool is engaged, it's actually in here firmly, but I have a gap at the top of my tool holder and collet. If I'm in a hurry, I may not see that. So what happens when I take it apart? Okay, so I've already broken it loose, and I'm gonna go ahead and loosen up the nut, pull my carbide blank out, pull my nut off, that back down. Well, I didn't do my collet any favors, and we see this damage quite frequently. It may not be as exaggerated as what I just did, but we do see it quite often, and normally on the smaller ER series. ER16, ER20 are the most pronounced that we see this with. But we're gonna get some close-up shots on this. If you look at the face of the collet, the nose up here, I can see what we call the groove, where the extraction ring inside the nut actually dug a groove into the top angle of the ER collet, and it's essentially ruined this collet. I can't use this anymore, or it'll leave a mark matching this inside the next nut that I use. So what about the nut itself? What damage might it have? Well, if we look inside here, I can actually see some damage on the eccentric ring, but it doesn't appear to have ruined the collet nut. I could use this again if I'm lucky. Sometimes though, it'll actually break that eccentric ring, and then you've done more damage than good. I have a nut that I have to throw away and a collet that I have to throw away. Slowing down, taking my time, I might have noticed that maybe it fell out, but that is why we actually designed the high Q nut. It's made to retain everything, making your assembly fail-safe. If you have any questions at all about the high Q nut or any other REGO-FIX product, please reach out to your REGO-FIX technical team. We are here to help.